Three men pretending to be HOA officials attempted to break into a peaceful suburban home in the middle of the night, hiding behind fake badges and fabricated authority. They thought they could slip past unnoticed, assuming fear and confusion would keep the family quiet. But they didn't expect Jeff Thompson, a retired Navy SEAL and father, who drew a line they would regret crossing. And just wait until you hear how this standoff played out, because justice didn't simply knock. It barged right through the front door. It started with a knock. Not frantic, not gentle, just three heavy raps, solid, deliberate. It was like the person at the door knew everyone was asleep and didn't care. The digital clock on Kyle Thompson's nightstand flickered to 3:12 a.m., glowing in soft red light. The kind of hour that feels inherently wrong, even without a reason to back it up. The 17-year-old stirred, unsure if the sound he'd heard was real or just a product of his half-conscious mind. It took a moment for his brain to catch up. And then came the second knock, louder and more forceful, cutting straight through his thoughts and hitting instinct instead. Kyle's heart skipped a beat as he sat up. The house was supposed to be still. This was Florida, for crying out loud. Things like this didn't happen here. Not in their neighborhood. He held his breath, straining to listen. Silence. Then, a crash. Something downstairs hit the floor. No, not just fell, but was knocked over. A loud shattering of ceramic or glass echoed down the hall, followed by a faint thud, like someone brushing past a wall. That was enough to shake him awake completely. Without thinking, Kyle swung his feet off the bed and hit the floor, adrenaline racing to catch up with his pulse. Half a second later, something moved quickly at his door. It was his little sister, Lily, 10 years old, slipping into the room like a whisper. Her pajama shirt wrinkled, her eyes wide with something Kyle had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. She didn't speak at first. She just crawled toward him, gripping the doorframe like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "They're at the back door," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Three guys. I saw them through the window. They've got those orange HOA badges, clipboards, radios." Kyle blinked, trying to make sense of what she was saying. HOA? At 3 a.m.? Lily's head shook. One of them pulled out a crowbar. "He tried to hide it, but I saw it." That's when the cold seeped in, the kind that doesn't come from a drafty window or a broken heater. It crawled down Kyle's spine and slowed everything around him. The HOA might have sent letters about lawn care and parking tickets, but they didn't knock on doors at night. They didn't come armed. They didn't sneak around the back with tools meant for breaking in. Something was wrong, and it was already inside their perimeter. Without a word, Kyle stood up, slowly, moving toward the hallway. From here, he could hear faint murmurs downstairs. Voices, too quiet to make out, but too calm to be anyone confused or panicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup, and someone was coming in. Kyle didn't need to say a thing. The moment his father, Jeff Thompson, stepped into the hallway and saw the expression on his son's face, alert, scared, unsure, something shifted behind Jeff's eyes. A flicker, a change that had nothing to do with fatherhood. It was something older, deeper, trained. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't curiosity. This was recognition. Jeff glanced toward the stairs and then toward the back of the house, where faint voices now murmured just outside the kitchen. Too calm. Far too calm. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. This was a man who'd spent 20 years in places most people only read about in the news. He'd seen enough to recognize when something was off, and nothing about the situation, its timing, the noise, the way they had entered, felt right. Without a word, Jeff turned and walked into the master bedroom. His steps were measured and quiet, deliberate. Kyle followed, a few paces behind, careful not to make a sound that would break the stillness his father had stepped into. It was as if the air had changed the moment Jeff understood what was happening. Inside the walk-in closet was a biometric gun safe. No drama, no panic. Jeff pressed his thumb to the reader, waited for the soft click, and then opened it. Everything inside was arranged with the kind of precision that only comes from routine, familiarity, discipline. He pulled out the AR-15, a standard weapon for some, but for Jeff it was more than that. A tool he knew better than most people knew their own phones. He checked it, loaded it, chambered around, silent. Kyle stood frozen, watching. He'd never seen his dad like this. Not angry, not scared, just focused. Finally, Jeff turned to his son, meeting his gaze. His voice was calm, controlled. "Stay behind me," he said. "If they come through that door, we don't talk. We end it." There was no bravado in his voice, no exaggerated drama. It was the kind of statement a man makes when he's lived long enough to know how quickly things can go from bad to worse, and how fast a single decision can mean the difference between survival and loss. Kyle nodded. That was all his father needed. Without another word, Jeff moved toward the hallway, his steps quiet but deliberate. Every part of him, the way his body moved, the way he breathed, the way he held himself, spoke one clear message: this house is not defenseless. And those testing it, they were about to learn that the hard way. The house was never supposed to sound like this. Below them, on the other side of the stairwell, Kyle could hear the steady creak of footsteps moving over mulch and tile. A deliberate scrape, followed by a shuffle, and then a voice. "We've had complaints about your landscaping. We need to inspect the side entrance." The tone of the voice made Kyle's stomach tighten. Too formal, too rehearsed, like the man had practiced that line or used it on 2 other doors before theirs. Kyle crept quietly toward the guest bedroom window, staying low. He lifted the corner of the blind just enough to see. 3 men, late 20s or early 30s, athletic but not uniformed. No police gear, no city inspector jackets, just cargo pants, mismatched vests, and orange tags clipped to their belts that looked like they came from a cheap hardware store. One of them had a clipboard. Another had a radio. And the biggest one, he had gloves. And under his folded pamphlet, barely visible, was a crowbar. Kyle's instinct screamed at him. These guys weren't from the HOA. They weren't here to talk about grass heights. They were playing a part, but the performance was thin and the cracks were showing. These weren't inspectors, and they weren't planning on leaving. By the time Kyle looked back, his father was already halfway down the stairs. His movements were silent, unnaturally fluid, like he was back on patrol, clearing rooms in a hostile building. Kyle followed from a safe distance, heart pounding, trying not to step on anything that might creak. More noise from below. One of the men tried the back door handle, rattling it, tapping the glass like it would somehow justify what came next. Then, a softer sound, a metallic click, followed by a pressure groan from the doorframe. They were forcing it open. Kyle held his breath. Jeff didn't speak at first. He stood just out of view in the shadows of the hallway, weapon lowered but ready. His posture spoke volumes. This was the line.